Welcome to another video tutorial on how to play the Tactical Naval System. In this video, we'll focus on how to conduct a missile attack against the surface unit, both against task groups, task units, and single units. And we'll go through, step by step, the process, and after the video, at the end of the video rather, I'll go through some exceptions to all of the rules that we've mentioned. There are some rather important ones. This video will be split up into two parts. The first part will be covering the 1985 module, and the second part will be covering the modern module. The overall procedure of how to conduct a surface attack is mostly the same, but there are some key differences. To start off, each missile in the Tactical Naval System, or TNS, has a color and a corresponding die, going from the black D4 to the white D20. This is exactly the same as an OWS, both to keep things consistent across the games for my students and cadets, but also because CRTs are not intuitive for non-wargamers. It is not necessarily intuitive for a non-wargamer for them to look at a CRT and try to figure out how much firepower to put at a unit in order to achieve the desired effect. In TNS, the first thing that must be established before missiles can start flying is the taxit status of the enemy unit. Here we have a NATO task group and a Soviet task group. The Soviet task group here has been placed into Taxit 1. For more information on how to place a unit into Taxit 1 or Taxit 2, please see the video on ISR. In TNS, there are three Taxit status. There is Taxit 3, which is undetected. Taxit 2, which means that there is something that's interesting to look at there, something that's be more interesting to take a closer look at. And if you're Soviet, you also have the opportunity to fire at a unit that's in Taxit 2, although there are significant penalties and you may be wasting your missiles and losing victory points because you hit civilian targets. NATO will require Taxit 1 in order to fire at a surface unit. Submarines function a bit differently. We go through that in the submarine video. In this situation, we have the Soviet task group has been detected and put into Taxit 1. The NATO player, he knows that his harpoons have a range of 2, so he can reach. So he goes to his task group overview and looks at his task group. All of his American units can reach, except the America because it has no missiles. All of the American units, except the Iowa, have something needs to be fixed. The kit should also have a 2 there. But all the American units have harpoons with have a range of 2. The Iowa have TASIBs, significantly longer range, different missile. Now, the broadsword here cannot participate. It cannot participate for that simple reason that it has exocets, and exocets only have a 1 hex range. But he decides to throw a total of 8 dice at the enemy. Each dice represents 2 missiles, so that'll be 16 missiles. And he decides to split them up into 2 salvos. Now, why would he do that? He would do that because each salvo can only target 1 ship. Going to the Soviet task group, we can see that the task group is composed of a Kashin, an Udaloy, a Sopramenoy, Kresta, Sverdlov, and a Kiev. Before anything can be decided upon, he must first determine the line of attack. The line of attack is determined by drawing a line from the center of the attacker to the center of the defender. And the hex sign that line crosses is considered the line of attack. Now, it's important that in the 1985 module, missiles will always hit the first thing they encounter. So in this case, the missiles will always hit the Kashin first, regardless of whether or not the NATO player actually wants to hit it. In this case, before the NATO player can target any other ship, he must first target the Kashin with at least 1 missile salvo. Doesn't matter how many missiles are in the salvo, but obviously if the missile does not destroy the Kashin, the second salvo will hit the Kashin with all of its missiles. So it can be worth it to make sure you take out the target before just lobbing a single missile at the Kashin and hoping for the best. So in this case, he decides to split his salvo up into 2 with 4 dice in each. And he decides to target the Kashin, because he must, and also decides to target the Udaloy. Udaloy will be targeted after the Kashin. But it's important to understand when ships are targeted. Ships are targeted usually in turn, but if the American had a task group that's directly south of the Soviets, he could also target the Udaloy simultaneously. This is important because your fire control radars can be saturated. The Sovremennoy here, for instance, its area defense only can be saturated by throwing 4 missiles at it. 4 dice. I'm going to use the term missiles and dice. It's the same, even though each dice represents 2 missiles. But he cannot do that in this case. So, he must first target the Kashin. Now, the Kashin, and as you'll notice that looking at the top left box, has no area defense. That means any missile will hit straight through the area defense onto the point defense. But the Sovremennoy does have area defense, and the Sovremennoy is directly adjacent and behind. The Sovremennoy is directly adjacent to the Kashin, and it can thus protect it with its 5 area defense. It cannot use its point defense to defend the Kashin because the Kashin is in front of it. And the Kashin has a point defense of its own. If the Kashin had an area defense of its own, the Sovremennoy could not defend it, at least up until the saturation. Or at least beyond the saturation. It could only defend beyond the saturation, I should rather say. Sorry about that. So the Kashin could defend against 1 missile in air defense. The Sovremennoy could take over the defense duty for the remaining 3. So here, we'll just quickly set up. One of the important things to remember as the defender is that you must allocate all SAMs to a target before any dice are rolled. Why is that? Well, during the course of 20, 30-something thousand simulations I've run in command mod operations, it usually takes about 3 SAMs to defeat 1 incoming missile if you're using a shoot-shoot doctrine. In this case, the defender is actually if you're using a shoot-shoot doctrine. In this case, the defender is actually saving some missiles compared to what command showed. So in order to sort of balance that out, you must allocate all the missiles and expend marking them off from your logistics sheet before you start rolling dice. Yes, that can sometimes lead to some SAM missiles being wasted. That's just how it is. SAM missiles or shields, defensive shields, must be allocated can maximum be allocated on a 1-to-1 basis. So there are 4 missiles coming in, and which means the Sovremennoy, even if it were not saturated, could not allocate more, or any of the ship for that matter, could not allocate more than 4 shields to defend the Kashin against in the area defense layer. The Kashin can defend 2. See the number 2. 3 is the strength. 2 is the saturation. It defends 2, but with a strength of 3 in the point defense layer. So we put those out. And it can defend up to 4 in the close-in weapons layer. Now we can start rolling dice. We have 4 missiles. Let me just find my dice again. 4 missiles that roll 4 dice. And we roll, and roll 4 dice. And we roll, and you pass on equal or higher. So you just need to roll 5 or higher on a 10-sided die in this case. If my math is correct, that is about a 60% chance of getting through. We see that we have 3 missiles that got through. That is exactly the result I was looking for. And now they have to go through the point defense layer. But you'll notice that there's only 2 shields in the point defense layer, which means that one of the missiles will automatically go through. The remaining 2 will have to be rolled for as normal. 3 or higher, both pass, which means that now there are 3 missiles against the close-in systems, which is both the guns and any potential E-war system. And boom. The Kashin has taken 3 damage and is now very much dead. Most ships in TNS have 1 hit point. The exceptions are PCFGs, because each PCFG counter represents 2 ships. Cruisers have 2 step losses. Non-US carriers and the Kirov have 3. And US carriers, as well as the Soviet Orel, have 4 step losses. Each missile that goes through the close-in weapons deals 1 damage. But the Kashin is toast, and every single missile heads straight into the burning hulk of the Kashin. You don't have missile spillover here. Now, with the way clear, the remaining missiles can head towards the Udaloy. Because the Udaloy is being defended later in the priority, i.e. not simultaneously as the Kashin, the Soframenoy can defend it again. It can defend it with 4 strength 5 shields. Again, but you'll notice that the Udaloy has no point defense, which means there's no point defense to defend it. It can also only throw out 3 close-in weapon shields, but they're strength 4. So in this case, we'll only roll the dice 2 times rather than 3. So we'll roll the dice. 5 or higher gets through. That's 2 missiles. Goes through. And then we'll roll to see if they go through the close-ends and sink the Udaloy. And they do. One of them goes through, hits the Udaloy, sinks it. That is, in essence, how a surface engagement is run in the Tactical Naval System, at least against the task groups. If we take it against a single ship, just to show how quickly this can actually go, we have a Soframenoy. Let's say we have 6 harpoons this time, just so we can saturate it. 6 harpoons. We'll know that 2 of the harpoons will automatically go through the area defense. So we have 2 that go through. We roll the remaining 4. And 5 or higher. All 4 go through. 2 will go through the point defense. We roll the remaining 4. And we have 2 that went through. And then we'll roll the remaining 4 against the close ends. 4 or higher. And that is a very dead Soframeni, getting hit by 8 harpoon missiles. 4 dice. It doesn't actually take as long as it may seem once you get the hang of it. You don't really necessarily need to use a very formalized way of setting up the attacks. It can be helpful if you have a lot of missiles and different ships defending, different ships defending, so you have different defensive shields. But apart from that, it doesn't really take as long as it may appear first glance. Now, the remaining thing is the task unit. Go down here. We have a Norwegian task unit. Task units operate very differently. A ship with a point defense value in a task unit can defend one other ship with this point defense value. So this Oslo frigate could defend this Hauk, which means that the missiles must first hit the Oslo frigate before they can get to the Hauk. The other Hauk can be targeted as you want it. A ship with area defense must be can defend up to 6 other ships, but necessarily not have to be targeted first. Only ships that are defending with point defense have to be targeted first. That's a bit of an abstraction due to the 40 nautical mile scale of this map, but it's something you just sort of have to accept. I think having too many of these task group sheets would be way too much overhead for a player and take up way too much space. This board is already a 6x4 or 180 by 120 centimeter, so it does take up quite a lot of space. At any rate, that is how you run a surface engagement from surface ships against surface ships in the Tactical Naval System.